Good morning.
Morning, Earl.
Have we got audio with Earl?
I don't know.
Hello.
Hi,
Yes.
Earl.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Good morning. So, Emily, shall we?
Sure, let's roll.
All right.
How did everybody do this week? Did you folks enjoy the practice?
Oh, I did. I just felt like I was just lying down, drifting off to sleep, and it was very pleasant. It went by 10 minutes, went by very fast. But I don't know. As far as connecting with the spiritual and the holy, I think I need a more in-depth, disciplined sort of sessions with somebody guiding me to make it work for me, because I meditate and get into zones all the time when I garden. And so this was like not as good as that zone I get into when I'm out in nature gardening.
What is it that happened when you're gardening that didn't happen this week?
I think my thoughts shut off more, or I'm just sort of not even, I'm unconsciously deadheading or something, but I'm not really thinking about it. So I'm not thinking as much, and maybe I need more than 10 minutes. But it was exactly like when I lie down to go to sleep and my thoughts just drift around pleasantly, and I try to just put them aside so I can go to sleep. And it was sort of exactly like that. It was very pleasant and calming. That's what it was for me.
Did you sit, Mary Alice, or were you lying down?
No, I was sitting in a rocker on the porch with my feet up, just very comfortable. And I closed my eyes and focused on sounds a lot to try to get away from the monkey mind. But, you know, I'm in such a relaxed state right now because the way life is.
Right.
That I don't know how it could get much calmer. I know I can, but I don't know how.
You're one of the few people I've heard say that you're calm right now. We've had this conversation. I know what you mean. A lot of people
I'm calm,
aren't so calm.
but I'm anxious, but I worry about the world, but my personal life is very calm. And my small little world.
I agree with Mary Alice about the gardening, but I think that the savasana in yoga is actually, I see that as centering.
Yes.
And that may be more so for you, since I believe you do yoga, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So that might, the savasana might be more your centering prayer. In the garden, you're in the flow, and you're just, I understand exactly what you're talking about there.
Yes, I know you do.
Can't get out of the garden.
No.
Well, I think it's also trying to find the right place. You know, for me, I mean, I practice this in the dark, really, in the morning early, or in the evening after my husband goes to bed. And I have a place upstairs, which I can hear this clock ticking. But, you know, at first, then of course I thought, is this a problem that the clock is ticking? And then I thought, you know, then it kind of blended into the background, and I found it sort of soothing, you know. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but.
We're hearing some sort of audio, either TV or something's going on
Radio or
somewhere.
something. If
That might be me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne.
It's my tea boiler. I turned it off. It'll
what do you-
quit.
So what do you think about the, like the clock or anything? I mean, is that a distraction? Or is that
You want to
an
take
okay
that,
thing?
Susan?
Well, that's a good point. There's actually a wall clock in here. I'm in the room where I do my centering prayer probably 95% of the time. And it had like a little pendulum and I had to tape the back. So once it quit making that noise, because that was annoying and distracting, definitely. I find consistency in building a practice to be really helpful. And so I do my morning sit. I usually get up around 7 just because of the sunlight. And shortly after that, I'll read the daily meditation from Roar to get my mind sort of channeled in that direction, and then have my 20-minute sit. Then I have breakfast, and the evening sit or afternoon sit for me around 4 or 4:30. I don't do too well if I'm trying to have a prayer sit later than that, or like it tends to fold into more sleep. I think that if it's too dark in the morning or too early for me, or too late, it doesn't. I'm not conscious enough. I'm not awake enough, because it's not a process of falling into sleep. We're actually becoming more awake in a kind of paradoxical way when we drop out of our ordinary consciousness and are opening our that process of kenosis, or letting go. So it should be more of a awakening if we can get there. And every session is different. Just lately, I've noticed that 20 minutes has gone by so fast. It's been kind of interesting. Other times I'll, be looking at my timer to see, and I'll be halfway through. I'm kind of good at telling the time, but staying with it. And I think consistency, because then our body takes on that habit. Like if it's time of day and place and process, if those things can be the same, if you really want to build and grow a practice, I think it makes it easier to drop into that center in the heart, and your time is beginning pretty much right when you close your eyes.
I like to say too, when I practice and I notice street traffic or ambient sound of any kind, thoughts pop up, worries, something that I know I have to do, I'm not practicing yet. I'm getting ready to practice, but I'm not practicing. I'm not praying yet. Let's put it that way. I'm practicing. So when I hear the clock, I just go clock. There you are, just clock, and let it go. And then if it keeps going in my mind, oh, I'm hearing that ticking, tick, 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 just keep going. Clock. There it is. I see the clock. And I also find that sometimes when I'm really active, when my mind is really active, this happens especially at the end of the day when I've had a long day doing things, running errands and blah, blah, whatever. I'm keyed up, I'm wired. And so my mind will be more active at that point. And do something like gardening, something that's meditative. Sometimes I sketch. I'll do drawing where I just calm down, sketching before I start my practice. Or I'll go out and I'll walk around my yard and just say good night to all the plants, or, you know what I mean? I'm just sort of getting ready for it. So 10 minutes is optimistic because there is some preparation for me to lead into sitting. Because when I sit and start to breathe and calm down and open, I'm closing the door, I'm going into my heart, and I'm letting God speak to me. So I'm not relaxing in the sense of, breathing slowly and calming down and lying down and letting go of the day, because I've already done that. I don't know if that makes sense or not. So that keeps me from falling asleep, and sitting upright with my feet on the floor in a posture that's reflects being awake rather than lying down and relaxing. Unless I'm having back problems that day, I don't lie down when I meditate. I'm hearing a television again.
Anybody have a TV on?
I don't know. I'm hearing some
I
broadcast.
me
hear
too.
voices too.
Anyway, maybe we're just maybe that's God coming in. I don't know.
And Emily, can you talk about God speaking to you?
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah, I know.
I don't hear a
words are that.
voice. It's letting go of who I am more than recognizing who God is. God is in the silence for me, and there is a fullness that happens in my heart. I just feel a peace and a presence. It's hard
Yeah.
to
Mhm,
describe other than that.
mhm.
I don't hear voices. I don't have aha moments about solving problems, although those things happen. I don't consider those hearing God's voice. I consider those my brain working. And
And you don't see visions and things like that.
no, not while I'm centering prayer. No.
Mhm. Okay.
No, I don't. I'm not having some experience
Epiphany.
where,
Yeah.
there's this vision or anything. There isn't a feel. Sometimes I finish centering prayer, there's body feeling that is, and heart feeling that's a sense of elation and lightness, joy. I mean, I have felt joy when I'm praying, and I don't know how to tears. I have someone told me there's a gift of tears. It's annoying and embarrassing for me because when I feel deeply and when I'm really happy, I weep. And sometimes that happens when I pray without words. Sometimes it happens when I pray with words. I'm not sure I can say more than that. Susan, do you want to open
Well,
up? About that?
I'm nodding to everything you're saying about the tears, the joy, the peace, these things. And something came to me just as you were saying those, that it's like when I get out of the way as much as I can and I drop back, it's almost like God is able to rearrange inside of me, like the puzzle pieces that the potter's hands take hold of my being, and I relax into that and allow my being to be handled, touched, moved, rearranged, shaped by God's presence. And I feel that that's an inner healing that happens to us, that when we can get out of being in control in that ego seat, then God is there doing what God is always doing, but it's just maybe we're more attuned to it. And sometimes I think tears will come because that's part of healing. And I noticed that much more so in the beginning years when I started the regular practice. There was much more intensity of feeling because I feel like there was probably a lot more in the way and getting, integrated. So I feel that God is the ultimate integrating force within our own being, and that we just don't have the skill ourselves. Our best skill is if we can learn to let go of trying to be the one in charge and let God be the potter and we're the clay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to add something, or does that help at all, Karen? I mean, in your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said last week, I'm kind of one of those people who has ants in their pants. So I'm always moving and my brain is always going. And so I don't have a real good practice of just being,
Yeah.
other than, like if I'm doing something that requires 100% of my attention, like playing golf. I mean, that's certainly not meditation, but you can, if you, so I, it's practice, and I'm probably an impatient person. It's like, you'd kind of like everything to happen quickly. But I think that I can recognize, like you were saying, clock, that you just don't have this continuing thought about it. You just
Right.
acknowledge it and try to let it go.
Well, you know, the other thing I wanted to add to that is that you're human. That is a human response to silence. That what people experience. Most of the people I know who want to practice either meditation or centering prayer, the people that I've met over the years, refer to themselves as impatient, having really active monkey mind. I'm really, really anxious. You know, all of us have monkey mind. All of us are impatient. All of us want God to speak to us. You know, whether we know that or acknowledge that, I believe that myself, that we all have a spiritual hunger of one form or another. And I think, as you said, the practice is something that comes day after day. It's something to look forward to, not something to do like working out. It's not like that. It's like going to it with anticipation and joy. I mean, maybe people go to working out with anticipation and joy, don't get me wrong, but it's not just another thing that you put on your list to check off. And it's an important part of who I am, like eating, like sleeping. And sometimes I have really, really ragged sessions where I can't come to center. Like Susan said, you know, sometimes they're not very, and I feel bad afterwards because I know what it feels like to let it all go and to be present. And when that doesn't happen, I go, okay, that was one of those times. And here I am, still alive another day. You know, it's not like there's this evolution of higher and greater, for me at least, where someday my head's going to explode and I'm going to have a big halo around me. I don't think that's going to happen. I find God, I take it out into the world. After I practice, I can take it out into the world. Did I lose everybody?
No,
Okay, I'm not seeing things here. Okay, I'm having problems with wind and my internet keeps going in and out. I take what I feel or what happens to me comes out. God speaking to me comes out, and how I'm able to live out into the world, what I do day after day. And that's where I see the growth and the change and the evolution.
I see your halo often, Emily and Susan.
Who's talking there?
Diane. Hi, Diane.
Anyway.
I'll speak again to the consistency. And Karen, you are quite the golfer, as I've seen from some photos. And I know Earl is an avid golfer as well. And golf is a very Zen sport, as sports go, I think, because it's helpful to try to get the ego and the head out of the way and to let your body and muscle memory sometimes take control in hitting a shot. But just like you train for golf and like you have regular routines and you practice putting and all these things, the centering prayer practice, if it's something that you decide you want to be a part of your life, then think of that morning practice, that evening practice or afternoon practice as the bookends of your day. And like Emily said, it's like, you don't skip breakfast, you don't skip dinner, that think of it as like part of your hygiene of your being, and it's your spiritual hygiene, your toothbrushing, your nourishment. And however much time you set aside, it becomes so built in that if you miss a day, then you feel really bad if you miss a sit, because it feels like there's something missing in your day. You feel a little bit off kilter. So it's really I think to just stick with it, because there will be raggedy days for sure. That's a good word, Emily, I think. And let go of the expectations that any prayer sit is going to be, monumental, or you're going to be able to sit down and write a poem about it or tell somebody about it. That doesn't happen every time you have a meal, for example. So in a way, I mean, it's counterintuitive, but if it's a mundane thing, an ordinary part of your life, it becomes ingrained within you. And that's where those seeds or fruits of the Spirit do manifest in your life and in your relationships. Because when that practice is something you're devoted to, and it's just, something you do without question, the benefits are real. They're powerful, I think, over time.
And I don't know if any of you ever have experienced this, but sometimes when we were all going to church together physically in the church, some mornings I'd wake up occasionally and I would go, I'm just not going to go to church today. I'm going to stay here and go out in my garden or do whatever I want to do. The whole time that I wasn't going to church, I was thinking, I'm not at church, I'm not at church, I'm missing something. And then for the rest of the day, I felt like I was missing something. And I was missing all of you, and I was missing the liturgy. I was missing that coming together. And that's what it is. I think, to your point, Susan, when you don't practice or if you miss it, there's something missing. It's a recognition in my life that there is something beyond my habits and my activities and my thoughts. There is something that is holy and deep, and I name it God and love, and I want to honor that every single day. And I choose to honor it every single day, twice a day, by doing this. And that's powerful for me. And what happens, like I said, what happens to my thoughts and everything else before I do it and after I'm done, keeps evolving as my practice grows, so does everything else in my life grow. And it's not nameable, I think. I think other people have seen it and commented on it, but it's hard for me to identify it. I just feel it. I'm a more emotive kind of gal. I'm babbling here. Anybody else want to talk about what they experienced this week?
Okay. Monday lasted a minute, 1 minute. I got distracted, promised myself, I'll get back to it because I remembered something I had to do right away, and never got back to it. Tuesday, just completely didn't even do my Bible reading Tuesday. Don't know what happened to Tuesday. Wednesday, very good practice, very good thing, very close. And somewhat Thursday, Friday, Saturday, not so much, more of my usual reading. I've been doing this, and it's it's a section from the New Testament, and then it's a section where people comment on the readings. I do that, and then I have a prayer language, and I use that, and then I often will sometimes I'll go into the centering prayer where I'm just being. And some days I slide right in, other days it's squirrel and I'm off running. But the garden is always my walk. He walks with me and he talks with me and he tells me I am his own.
Yeah.
So,
I'm with you there. I'm with you and Mary Alice 100%. I know what that's like. That's like walking meditation for me, to work in the garden, to work outside.
Yeah, me too.
You do empty out and you become, it's a drawing is the same way. Knitting is the
Yep.
same way. It's an activity of a meditative act.
It is.
That reminded me of one aspect of all of the wisdom schools that Cynthia leads, and others, other teachers who have worked with her, is a process, a time of day set aside for what's called conscious labor. And this goes to the Benedictine ora et labora. The hours of the day are spent in prayer and work. And that I found to be so valuable. I mean, a lot of times it was raking leaves. Sometimes after a storm, I remember at Canuga, we were all picking up sticks. And the focus of the practice was intention, awake presence in the now. And, we practice moving very slowly, as you described earlier, Emily. And that outdoor time was some of the most valuable part. And we would talk about it later in a group get together. And the more cerebral of us, who tend to inhabit our heads the most, have the hardest time with this conscious labor practice outside and need it the most in order to get back more into the body and learn how to be more in the moment. So I think what all three of y'all are talking about, the garden kind of gets you there right away. It's in your bones. It's in, it's part of your breath.
Well, it takes
You know,
it takes me into something that's much bigger than myself right off the bat. I am out in the creation, it's
Yeah.
much bigger than me, not me, um, and I agree with you about the Ora Elabora and the wisdom school practice. I found that very powerful too.
Yeah. So really y'all are already doing that. I mean, if you alternate part of your day with that kind of practice, and then try the contemplative sit, the stillness that doesn't involve motion or activity. And it's a matter of giving it time, because it's not going to come immediately. And instead of starting with 10 minutes, maybe start with 5 minutes, 3 minutes. I mean, incrementally, any practice is developed over time by increment.
And start with something after you've done something that's emptied you out a bit. That if you have a yoga practice, or if gardening does that for you, or meditation of another kind does that for you, start with that, and then try to practice. I think that will help. Everybody comes to it in a different way, and everybody's practice develops a little differently. And it takes a long time to know that your Dorian is your Dorian, and that it's okay. Not, we look to a lot of teachers along the way. What Susan moves Susan and reaches Susan may or may not be what reaches me. So don't feel bad if not a single word that you've heard in either of these sessions doesn't work for you. That you're here tells me that you want to have a practice. Just keep looking. I mean, I know, Rob, you and Pam hike all the time. I don't know about the rest of you other than the gardeners. Adele, how about you? What's your practice like? Do you feel like talking about it?
Well, I had not heard about any of this stuff until I went to seminary, which was in 1978. And I began hearing things and experiencing things through classes there. A class I had always wanted to take and never could work into my schedule was a class taught by an Episcopalian, John Westerhoff, entitled "The Pastor is Spiritual Guide." And I never could take it, but what I did, I wound up with a little extra money through a scholarship right at the time I graduated. I bought the reading list for that, and I took it with me as I went into my first parish appointment, and I began to read these books, which are classics of contemporary spirituality now, and read those, worked with spiritual guides if I could find them, places where I lived. I moved around a lot, have dabbled in books, Edward Hayes and other things like that over the years. It's complicated. As far as where I am right now, having practiced spiritual centering prayer years ago, when I first was learning about it, and having to do a lot of that on my own without a person to teach me. Then I went into all of this struggle that I know you all have heard about with caregiving, which took some 25 years of my life and was very disruptive as far as personal peace. When you're having to drive up and down the road to Piedmont, where my parents were for a while in their illnesses, and move a very demanding mother up here, and having to go entertain, listen to a lot of carping about really very minor things, but she thought they were major. And then my husband's illness. During all of that, it was so anxiety producing, I guess, to me. It was just hard to find a way to do that. And even though I would try at times, my mind was just too entirely stressed out. And I share this with you not to monopolize the conversation, but to tell you these days may come to any of us when the phone is just ringing and ringing with doctors and nurses and other people, and this can go on for years. So it having been 2 years now since my husband died, I've begun to calm very gradually and to try to work my way back into that. As far as this week went, I did have a day, it was Tuesday or Wednesday, when the 10 minutes went by very fast. Otherwise, I've tried to stay in it. But as far as the disrupted years, I had just worked more with reading. And I mean, I like Tevye's form from gosh, I can't even think anymore. Fiddler on the Roof, of the daily conversation with God. I mean, I figured God could understand in those disrupted times how distraught my own mind was. And if what worked for me better was to just have this conversation with God about what went on, visiting my mother or whatever, that was fine. I'm just much more patient with whatever seems to be happening with me, but I am beginning to calm more now. That's probably more information than you wanted, but at any rate,
No, that's helpful because it raises a point as to whether or not spoken prayer, sung prayer, worshipful prayer, prayers of intervention, all the kinds of prayers where we use words, this isn't trying to displace them, as I'm sure you know. And those are all valuable, and those are all doorways towards centering prayer for me. But when I stop the words is when I start to listen. So that's the difference. And they're very powerful, and I have to have both. And I know what you mean about talking about all what's going on, and there's a great comfort in that too.
Well, and it wasn't just what I experienced with my parents, but there were a great many other people in my family who were dying at the same time.
Yeah.
One little subset of my father's family just blew up over illnesses and things like that. So knowing things like that are going on, or being minimally involved in it myself, or dealing with people who are aware of it going on with their siblings or whoever, is disturbing. And that was part of what was very disturbing to me in prayer. I mean, to me, prayer is conversation. And part of that is listening. Part of that may be talking, but you're certainly not informing God about anything that God doesn't know about. What I call educating God, But I do think that those kinds of verbalizations of what you're feeling, I think that's part of prayer.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that made me think too, Adele. I mean, when you talk, when you're praying and you're using words, there's that, and maybe that's a cathartic experience. But I think too, in the silence, and maybe I haven't experienced it yet, but I have to imagine there's a cathartic experience in that too, even though you're not necessarily expressing it via words.
It's the other half of the conversation.
Well, I do find
It's
the
the
older I
educating
get,
Emily half of the conversation.
well, the older I get, the less I appreciate using words at all in prayer, and it may not even be whole sentences.
Okay, for the week for me, a couple of times, maybe 3 times, I meditated, or let's use the term loosely. I sat down for 10 minutes, twice, and I missed a day. So I did not find a regular pattern. So I need a place. I think I have a couple of places in the house, and I need to set out a time. I think it's going to be a valuable thing for me. But when I sit down, I set a timer, and if I waited until I stopped having distractions, I'd never get started.
Oh, I didn't say wait until you stop having distractions.
Because I mean, what I'm trying to do is think of nothing. And images, the stuff I have to do during the day, woodworking projects, what's for dinner, all of this crap starts slipping into my head. And then when that goes away, I keep having images. And what I'm trying to get to is a point where I can just see. So I'm find myself sitting there thinking, well, let's think about outer space,
Mhm.
just black and, the night sky or something to get to blank my mind out and open myself up to God. So it's starting to work. At the end of the 10 minutes, so then I'll get into a place where I'm not sure what's happening, and then the timer will go off. And then when that goes off and I shut it off, the timer, it's like, okay, did I meditate or just nap? Which, so, I'm not awaking from this bursting with spiritual energy. So it isn't working yet, but I feel like it could. I just need to figure, I need to get a rhythm. Huh?
I think it's working.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think it's
Well,
working.
well, my hair's not growing any faster.
I'm curious, especially thinking about you, Rob,
Yeah.
English professor that you are. If 'Cause I find it helpful sometimes to take a short piece, like these reflections we included, there's a piece from Rumi, there's a piece from Lao Tzu and so forth. And read that before my prayer sit and let that simmer, let that stew in, that pot, and to where my attention begins with that piece of wisdom in just as very few words, but that's sometimes a way in for me to calmness, to quiet. And instead of thoughts going about tasks I have or what's for dinner, all those other things, the mundane, dailiness of being in the world, sometimes that bit of scripture or wisdom teaching or poetry helps keep me quieter inside, and not to ruminate on the words, and there's a little bit of a dance there to where the words might be a way in, but they don't trap you in themselves. And they're just like a little bit of a fragrance or a lovely scent of magnolia or jasmine that helps get your mind in a peaceful place. So that may be useful for you to try sometime.
And I'd add to that, if you find one, rather than just reading a different one every day, if you find one that really speaks to you, the shorter the better. Use it every day for a long time. Don't let that become not a mantra, but part of the liturgy that takes you toward central prayer. Because that's what it is. It's a here I am. Here's the universe. Here's God. I'm going to sit and be with God now.
And that repetition, you used the word liturgy. Sorry, Emily, to interrupt, but it occurred that why many of us love the liturgy so much, it's the repetition. And the repetition is the practice itself. So that's a very good point, Emily, is to find one little passage. Like I know for a long time, I would go with thy kingdom come, thy will be done. And that would be the scripture that would lead me into a place where I felt rather quickly centered and calm. But yeah, consistency and repetition, like anything that you become good at, like woodworking or cooking, the more consistent and that you are, I think the easier it becomes.
I used Psalm 139 for years. And different parts of it, the whole thing, but different parts of it. If you're not familiar with it, up from 1 to 17 was what worked for me. So check it out. If you're, Lord, you have searched me out and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You discern my thoughts from afar. Each verse could stand alone.
Yeah.
I leave out 18 to the end because that's the smite my enemies part, and I'm really not part.
Well, that was very helpful during the election, I thought. So. My husband used to say there are times in life when the imprecatory psalms can be quite comforting.
Yes.
Yeah.
What, Earl, we haven't heard from you. I don't want to cut anybody off in the middle here, but I want to make sure that we hear from all of us.
We don't have audio from Earl.
Is Earl speaking?
He's muted.
How's that? Can you hear me
There you
now?
go. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I did meditate a little bit this week. I used to meditate quite a bit, and I've gone to many conferences and taught meditation for a long time in my parish. And I found this week that it was a struggle. My mind was really wandering. I was impatient. I wanted to stop as quickly as I could. So what I thought about that was that it really is a practice. And when you get out of practice, it's, you have to stay with it. Otherwise, it's difficult to get back in it. For me, and I don't know, Rob, if this would help you, it's focusing on the breath that's so important to me, because the breath is really a sensation. When you can feel the sensation created by the breath in your nostrils or in your chest, that brings me out of my mind into another place. One of the ways to talk about meditation, and you all have already said this, is it's about letting go. Letting go of the clock. There's often a sound. I know when I went to the Hindu ashram and we meditated, there were cars going back and forth outside. And it was a matter of, Emily, as you said this, naming it, cars or noise, or just choose a word, and then return to the breath. So it's a returning, it's kind of a process. And so we're caught up in past or future, and then we return to the breath, and then we're caught up in something else. And I forget who it was, whether it was Chopra or somebody said, if I sit for 20 minutes and I meditate for 30 seconds, I've had a great sit, It doesn't, the one thing I'd like to add that you haven't spoken about is that sometimes feelings come up when we're meditating. Anger is one that comes up quite a bit in meditation. And these are unresolved issues that we have in our own life. And just like the clock or thinking or whatever, it's good to just name it as anger. And then for me, it would be a matter of returning to the breath again. And I might go back to the anger in a second and then return to the breath. I had an interesting experience. I did a workshop with Sylvia Bornstein. Some of you may know her. And she told a story, which I just can't forget. She said she was in a conference on meditation, and she brought a prayer stool with her. And she got to the room early and she set up her prayer stool. And then she went out and had coffee or whatever they did. And then she came back ready to start the meditation. And there was a guy sitting on her prayer stool. And so she took another seat, and during this whole conference, she's saying, that son of a gun, why is he sitting on my prayer stool? I can't wait till this conference is over. I'm going to give that guy a piece of my mind. And she kept coming back to the anger, over and over and over again. And she said, so the conference was finally over. This is a silent conference, so she couldn't speak to him, during the meditation at all. So the conference was finally over. She opened her eyes, ready to talk to this guy, and he had left. He had left early, and the prayer stool was empty, and he was gone, and she had no chance to speak with him. And she thought, I spent whatever this was, 48 hours or a week or whatever it was, thinking about and feeling all this anger, and it went no place whatsoever. And so
Big lesson.
anger, what's that?
Big lesson.
A big lesson, yeah.
That got
So we have to learn to let go of feelings too, as well as thoughts and
Yeah.
sounds and things beyond extraneous things.
Jack Cornfield taught once that he was leading a meditation retreat, and
Mhm.
at break time at lunch, he went out and called at that time it was his fiance, his girlfriend, and they had an argument over the phone.
Mhm.
He said, well, I have to go now. I have to go back in. They went back and forth for 15 minutes, and he went back in, and he was set on the schedule to lead the loving kindness meditation.
Oh.
And so he sat down and said, okay, let's breathe and think of someone you love, and may that person be at peace. May that person be safe. Say it. And in his mind, he was going, well, she was really wrong. I don't know why. And all this stuff going on in his head. And then
Right.
you'd be at peace again in the world. May you have loving kindness in your heart. I don't know, so he went back and forth with these two meditation voice, that calm leading voice, and then, and he talks a lot too about all the inner voices that we have that cause emotions, like parental guidance when we're young comes back on us when we're old sometimes, and we'll be just, you have to do this, you have to do that. Why aren't you doing this? And why did I do that? And you have those kinds of moments that make you feel not just anger or fear, but guilt, shame.
Right. Right.
And then you have to just say, if you can't name what it is that's happening, because a lot of times we can't,
Mhm.
just name it as the person's name. Recognize who it is. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Edith.
Mhm.
I hear you, Dad. Whatever it is, and then at some point you do know what it is, and you can identify the specific emotion, and maybe you can identify it right off the bat. But that
Right.
works in centering prayer as well. It's a form of returning, letting go, and
Mhm.
getting out, because that's part of you it's part of yourself that you allow to come up when you get silent. And the more you practice being silent, the more that stuff finds a place somewhere else in your life, and the silence remains more silent. That's true for me.
Well, sometime
and-
perhaps when we're all safe, we can get together and meditate together.
Susan and I
I
have been
think
talking,
there's a wonderful energy in
There is.
meditating together.
yeah,
There
And
is.
sometimes we can draw on each other's peacefulness. If I'm not so peaceful and you're peaceful, I can kind of catch hold of that and be part of that. And it's a wonderful time to be together
Yeah.
in silence, as we can do that.
when Jocelyn leads us at the beginning of the 8 o'clock, I don't know if you do this in the 10 o'clock, Jocelyn, where you say we begin the service with them. I just want it to go on. Sometimes it's like, oh, so wonderful, because that energy is there, Earl.
Right.
that-
It is. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We
Go ahead.
plan to create a resource page. It's already up on the website, I believe, under resources, right, Jocelyn, the tab resources. And Emily and I are going to curate this page, and I plan to work with it a good bit starting Monday to add some links. And Earl, we talked about, Emily and I talked about in the post-COVID world that we will all come to inhabit one day together, that we would like to offer sessions and discuss, as a group going forward, of
Yeah.
having centering prayer group sits,
Mhm.
and Emily and I commit to, nurturing that along at the church. Because I agree. I mean, the first time I ever sat and it was like 300 people. I mean, it's just incredible what you can get from that presence of your fellow beings. It's lovely.
Mhm.
So we'd like
Susan,
to.
if I could interrupt just for a second, it is going on. I just found out this past week, Mindy, who is the each person, she sits with a couple of people on Wednesdays for 20 minutes, right
Okay.
before Jocelyn begins the healing service. And
Great.
go up into the choir section of the church and sit. And I told her I might join from like the back pew where I sit out of COVID fear, but
Yeah.
that I may be going in on Wednesday now and just sitting with them because of the community of doing it.
Yeah.
And we had a lovely long conversation, and she's been doing this for a while. So I think,
I'm wondering if we couldn't do this online. I'm wondering, there are guided meditations as well as
Mhm.
silent meditations, and one of you could lead a brief guided meditation, and then we could actually sit in silence in front of our computer. I mean, it's,
I would be happy to give that.
it's possible to do that sort of thing. Maybe that would help us all, because I'm, even though I've done this for years, I'm struggling to get back to it. So it might help me
Community
a
is
lot.
always helpful. Community is always good. Earlier, Earl, you mentioned about emotions coming up and you specifically said anger in it. I wanted to mention, I will add this to our resource page because it was something completely new to me, is the welcoming prayer. And this is an adjunct in centering prayer. And I find it really fascinating. And so there's some good, accessible resources I'll add when you see that link about welcoming prayer. It's very practical and useful. And it's a gentle inner stance toward these emotions that come up that allow them. And so there's not an inner resistance, because resistance, like when you were describing Jack Cornfield's inner battle, which is classic, we all have. And if we can learn to not join the battle,
Right.
we can be much more at peace. But I'll add that welcoming prayer. I'm still a beginner. So that was something completely new to me, but I thought, wow, this is really neat.
Yeah.